retirement. He did not get fired. He took an early retirement. So you have to issue and keep your voice loud and apply the tactics that you see moving the needle. Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor were killed in February and March, I think. I know March 13th. I believe it was February when Ahmaud Arbery was killed. Nothing happened until people started raising their voices. Imagine that it took people, the lawyers and others, to get on these situations to bring attention to murder. Imagine. They had a videotape of Ahmaud Arbery being killed. Right. And that meme that was going around was so powerful. They didn't arrest them and charge the McMichaels because they saw the video. They did it because you saw the video. Yeah. We saw it. So that's one thing, is keeping our voices out there loud and bold. I think also we have to understand that our protest movement is only as strong as our march to the polls, right? So you can't be marching on the street and then talking about, well, I don't vote. That ain't gonna really work. It just doesn't connect, because the things that you're marching for, unfortunately, in this moment, until the citizens, take the country and we control it and Black folks are just running everything, which, my Black is beautiful, who knows? Who knows? But until that happens, people have to actually write the legislation and get the laws passed that you're marching for. So it's good to have protests, but that protest has to be backed up by a empowered voting base. Do I believe that it's a difficult task when you're being asked to vote for people you don't like? Sure. I do think that. But I also feel like, especially for our age group and folks coming that are younger than us, we weren't necessarily happy with how this whole Democratic nomination process turned out. Just everything that happened, a lot of things happened that really upset people. Well, when you look at the polls, there were a lot of places where, and look at the data, there were a lot of places when we didn't show up. Right. We didn't show up. We didn't think primaries were important. So it's a little bit, you got to have both things. No, we're not going to always get everything that we want. We're not going to get everyone that we want. But certainly we can begin the process of demanding that our protests are connected to policy. And then finally, I'll say, you got to run yourself. Like, you literally have to run yourself, because sometimes that's the only answer. I know a lot of people that ran for office because they just knew it had to be, I have to say it, I have to do it. And then we as a community have to understand that some of the $1.4 trillion that we spend needs to back these candidates so that they can continue to be free and liberated to speak truth to power and to be focused and committed to the agenda that we sent them to office to fulfill. So I think, just to sum it up, it's all connected. And if you leave out a particular part of it, what happens is that the movement that we're trying to, or the needle we're trying to move, is weakened.
I think one thing I want to add about voting, because it can be so polarizing, and there's so many people who, feel very disenfranchised by the process, who feel taken for granted by all of the political parties, including the ones on the far left. And that our voices haven't been heard or adequately censored in policy or reflected in things that happen once someone is elected, but that we have to remember we're not exempt from the laws that we did not contribute to getting passed, right? So these people are still in office making decisions that impact our lives, particularly on the local level, because we so often get laser focused on the top of the ticket, the president, and maybe we're talking about Congress, but oftentimes we're not talking about city councils, we're not talking about district attorneys, we're not talking about people that are making decisions that impact these stories, that become hashtags, that galvanize people to come out into the streets. So before we move on into talking about COVID-19, which I certainly want to make sure that we make time to do that, thinking about, before I get to that, not everybody is built for being in the streets protesting.
No.
For a number of reasons. There are people who think they are built for it.
and they are not.
And they are not. It requires there are a number of different sorts of temperaments that work in a situation that can be as anxiety inducing, that can be dangerous, that can be emotionally devastating, that can be just emotionally charged in ways that not everybody's built for. Doesn't mean you're weak, doesn't mean you don't have something to contribute to the movement if your place isn't out there. But if that's not where your place is, in addition to getting folks registered to vote, taking people with you to vote, and organizing around elections, what are some of the ways that folks can be doing organizing work in their own communities? A lot of people hear organizer and they only think of protests and they only think of marches and rallies. That's and right. or they only think of elections, but they don't think of all the other things that organizers are doing in the fight for justice right now and always.
I'm glad you said that, because I've told a few young people, hey, if you so angry, like that you just can't function, you can't think straight, you ready to go tear it down, burn it down, destroy it, stay home that day. That's not the day. Like, I get it. I understand your frustration, but it's not always helpful to show up not in your best mind. And so you are right. It's funny, but it's true that there are people who think they're doing it right, and they're actually creating more of a story that can be used against us than the progress that we're trying to make. Fund movements. I had a fundraiser the other day for my birthday. I turned 40. I asked people to give $4, $40, or $400. Simple. And that $4, and guess what? When I get off the phone, off this live with you, I need to go make 2 donations to other organizations because people did give and we have to pay it forward. I know I've been an activist that was out there. My family's at home. I have responsibilities, but I'm so passionate about the issue that, the car note is not getting paid right now. And, and we're deciding between the food and other essential things, essential services. That's an actual thing, right? Like activists struggle hard, writers,
absolutely.
People trying to tell Black stories, people trying to, be committed, unbossed and unbought. You can really suffer in this work. And so when I'm blessed, when Until Freedom is blessed, our organization is like, yo, let's make sure that some of these people we see out here doing real work are getting the $4, $40, and $400 that they deserve so that they can continue to be a part of this resistance movement. So I would say, don't think, oh, well, I don't have a lot of money, so I can't really help. Well, that $4, when you put that with 50 other people that are giving $4, that's a big deal. That helps a lot to move us around, to keep us engaged. So I say fund movements, volunteering your time, not just protesting, just being in the background, helping to answer DMs. You talked about DMs. I'm afraid of my DMs. I don't even go on Twitter because it's just, Twitter is for grown people. You are a grown person. You go on Twitter. I am not grown enough to go on there because you gotta have tough skin to hang out on Twitter. You do. So if you're somebody that knows social media well, there are many organizations that one of the biggest problems that they have is they can't get their messaging together and get it out, right? They need help. And not everybody can be on the front line because then there's no back office running.
Right.
So volunteering your time, ensuring, giving your resources are 2 things that I would say are incredibly important. I'm thinking, I think those 2 things are like it's like the heart, the center of it, is that people don't understand that it does not make you less than, less involved, less fly, less, effective because you've decided that marching is not your thing. But doing nothing is not okay.
So in terms of time, another thing, we've seen a lot of pictures of children at protests recently. And I think that's something that folks found to be very heartwarming and uplifting back in 2014 and 2015 and 2016. Right now, things are different, and we're talking about an uprising that's taking place in the middle of a deadly pandemic. One of the things that you may be able to do to help somebody be on the front lines is to take care of their children so that they don't have to bring them out there.
Absolutely. Making
so,
I'm gonna say, I'm gonna say here on this live tonight, and I'm gonna post it on my page. We need masks for small kids because they have these big old masks on their faces that are really not protecting them. We need to make masks for young children so that they can have something that makes them comfortable, not just protesting, but in every move that they make outside of their homes during this time.
Absolutely. Before we go fully into COVID, one last question that isn't about COVID, and then we're going to get into questions from the audience. So I see we've got 17 of them waiting. We're not going to get to all 17, but I'm going to get to as many of them as possible. Thinking about our sister Breonna Taylor, thinking about our sister Atiana Jefferson, and Corinne Gaines, and Sandra Bland, and Corinne Gaines
Still
is a
mad
place.
about Corinne Gaines.
That is, we could talk about that story all day and just where the community fell short. I'll say that. All of us. There's been a lot of talk about why we don't get the same agitation, the same outrage when Black women are killed at the hands of either law enforcement or persons that are acting as if, who have deputized themselves as law enforcement, right? When it's a Black woman whose life has been lost, it's treated as if perhaps, they were looking for her boyfriend. It happened on accident, right? Thinking of Rekia Boyd in Chicago, the officer servant who shot her, his gun accidentally discharged. So it was treated as if, and shout out to all of the powerful organizers in Chicago who never let her name be forgotten and who have continued to fight for her, but not galvanizing the sort of national attention, right? Her death didn't call us to the streets the way it did the way Mike Brown's death did, the way that Eric Garner's death did. Do you think that this is the moment where things are going to turn around? Because Breonna died before George Floyd, right? She died in March. So we had in police custody for to spark the match. Do you think that folks are really ready to have that conversation and to hear that now? Because I remember people saying in 2014, and it was said in 2015, and uplifted the names of Black women who've been killed by police and by other deadly forces within the community and outside. But it doesn't seem like the world is on fire for Breonna, or it's just starting to be on fire for Breonna.
It's starting. Yeah, I mean, it's getting there. We released the campaign today where a number of influencers, celebrities, and activists came together to ask the question, do you know Breonna Taylor's story? And it is in collaboration with her mother, Tamika Palmer, who's telling the story. And then I am giving action items, things that people can do. The reason why we came up with that campaign is because literally Alicia Keys is like hitting me up, yo, what are we gonna do? Like, this sister just cannot go to the wayside. We have to do something. And she and I got on the phone all night and cooked up an idea and started hitting up everybody we know saying, hey, we need you to participate in this campaign so that we can get some attention. And now Billboard magazine and and unfortunately we have to use faces that people know. Not unfortunately, I guess it's always a collaboration of the ins and outs of our culture to come together to make up the force that is now bringing some more attention and helping to sustain Breonna's story and hopefully pushing to see some things happen. Like today, 9 o'clock in the morning, several celebrity women posted their videos. And then the next thing you know, the officer who wrote the report where he lied and said that there were suspicious packages that the Postal Service had confirmed, suspicious packages going to her home. And that was one of the reasons why he was asking for a no-knock warrant when the Postal Service said never happened. They never reported that there were packages going there that were unusual. And in fact, there were no packages going there that was unusual. And there were no drugs found in her home. So it would all, you know, pretty much go together. And so, so with the campaign, I don't know, I was rambling along, but with the campaign that we put out, you're starting to see people give attention to it a little bit more. And that's so important because, Jamila, when you talked about Corinne Gaines, I can't, because I know what folks were saying. You know, I know what people were saying. I know people said that Sandra Bland was too nasty, that, you know, she should have just did whatever they told her to do. I know that until a Tatiana Jefferson, I think that's like the first time when people were like, yo, like, you know, what are we talking about? Like, she just stood up in the window and they were still trying to place a gun in her hand. I'm talking about our people. Yeah. I'm not talking about like the media, the white media. I'm talking about our people. They were trying to place a gun in a Tatiana Jefferson's hand to make an excuse for why the police officer shot her through her window. Yep. In the Bronx, there was a woman by the name of Deborah Danner who was shot in her living room when police burst in her house about nothing. We still don't even know. And this was an officer who had been to her home before because she suffered from mental illness. These cases, if we started calling the names, most people don't know them. So what we're doing is using our platform. And I was saying before I got thrown off that, you know, the interconnectedness of using every voice, the local grassroots folks, the attorneys, the celebrities, the elected officials, using everyone is unfortunately what we have to do to keep a Black woman's name alive. And by the way, if we don't deal with, yes, the officers need to be arrested, they need to be fired, all of that, we need accountability, but the no-knock warrant has to go. Because then we'll be back dealing with Lucy Taylor next week. And in order to make that stop, we've got to use Breonna Taylor as an example. Oh, I know what I was going to say. The report. So the report that we saw, this man has now been placed on administrative leave this afternoon after that report, after the campaign went out. I don't know that they were coordinated, but it's interesting that after a campaign was released with all of these faces and all of these voices, and Cardi B's video got 3 million views within an hour or so, okay? So they're like, oh, they won't stop, like, go home. The report that was written said there was no force of entry. This is their report.
Their report.
Okay, we know there was. They broke a door down. It said that there was no
injuries,
no bias, no bias. I don't even know what kind of question is that to ask on a report. So somebody's making a determination because a police officer writes that there was no bias about their own colleagues. Right. Crazy. Yeah. Then, I mean, that one just blows my mind. Linda was screaming today, like, no bias. What do you mean no bias?
Right. Who are you to say that?
It's for you to even say that. Like, who makes that determination? That should be an outside entity. And then for them to say no injuries when a woman had 8 bullets in her body on the ground. But you know why they did that? It's the same reason why the man was able to lie on the no-knock warrant. They are used to making up these false reports. As Ida B. Wells says, the ones that commit the murders are also writing the reports. Yep. That was another one that Linda reminded me of today as she was hollering in my ear about how this is disgusting. And it is. I'm talking about Linda Sarsour, my partner, at Until Freedom. And they are used to doing this and getting away with it. And only because we're paying attention in this moment are we seeing it. Because otherwise, it would just be happening and we wouldn't even know. Right. And how many times do you think they have killed us? Black women, Black babies, and wrote the reports in their favor. The same way they did with Sandra Bland. I love the fact that people have this petition that they want to open Sandra Bland's case. because there was so many lies. We saw the man lying on the videotape, and no one has been held accountable for whatever happened to Sandra Bland. So these things, Jamila, we're watching them. COVID-19 slowed us all the way down. And we can see, we can hear.
And yet, somehow, in the middle of COVID-19, this moment has begun, right?
Yeah.
Or this work, this fight that has been going on for so long has taken on a very different temperature, and a different level of perhaps sustainability than we've seen in our lifetimes. But let's talk about the implications of COVID-19 right now, because we know that our people are particularly susceptible to falling ill and perhaps losing their lives to this virus. We know that because of medical racism, which means that there are people who have had symptoms, who have gone to the doctor once, twice, three times and asked for a COVID test and been denied, only to go home and die. Many of them Black women, Black men, right? Elderly people, people with pre-existing conditions. There have been people who are given, they're admitted to the hospital, they're given the test, they're found to be suffering from this, and there's little that can be done at the point in which they begin receiving treatment, right? There's the poor health care and the poor treatment that so many of us have experienced at the hands of medical providers, regardless of whether we have good health insurance or not, right? Because if the Black maternal health crisis has taught us anything about our lives, it's that you can have top flight health care, you can be well educated, well paid, pay for the best doctors, and not receive the same sort of treatment that medical professionals, right? Just because you're Black, you're not getting the sort of treatment and care that these professionals have sworn to provide to anyone who comes across the doors of the hospital. So with that, let's talk about the implications of protests and mass gatherings at a time where there's a very deadly virus that's circulating, and why it's important that folks that are going out into the streets and organizing right now to do that are protecting themselves.
Listen, I remember waking up thinking to myself when I had to do the protests in New York City, the first time that we left our homes to go protest in New York. And my mom had a stroke, and she is in a serious situation. I mean, she has been paralyzed in parts of her body. And I've been helping to take care of her. And then this protest movement pops up, and there's so much that has to be done that I'm afraid when I go around my mom, because I know I'm around so many people, and my mother is 75 years old. I don't want to bring her the virus. I do try to wear my mask and socially distant. I don't hug and kiss her. I don't get in her bed. We wash our hands, sanitize everything, and do all that we can. But I remember thinking when I was about to go to the New York protest, I hate everything. That's literally what I was saying to myself. I hate everything, because I have no business being forced to the streets in this moment when I should be home protecting myself, protecting my family. But there's no way that you can sit and be silent and let these people kill you without bringing some attention to it, because they'll just, they don't stop. They're relentless. They don't say, well, you know what, it's a pandemic, this is not, we should chill. No, they just keep on pushing and pushing and pushing. And guess what? If some of us with some wisdom and some care and concern weren't out there helping to point out detractors and I like to call them protest trolls that are really not our friends, they're really not with us, they're not there for our agenda. But when they throw a rock, then it gets the young people hyped, like, oh, that's what we doing, we throwing rocks? No, you need to know that that person is not your friend. Look at how they're behaving. Hey, I understand that you're upset, but I need you to pull your mask up over your face while you're talking. Let's use some sanitizer to clean this microphone or this bullhorn before the next person speaks. All of those things had to happen. I thankfully had a lot of people sending me thousands of masks so that we could give them out. Rock Nation made masks. We received a number of donations of masks even this weekend or the weekend that passed. for the Manhattan and the Bronx rallies. And we